Okay, so after a little bit of a cry, a little bit of a panic, I went around and did a little bit of cleaning, and I think I'm ready to tackle this project. The staff corner, a little sanding, cutting corner. Here I have my little resin working area. So let's get this started. Hello everyone, welcome back. Okay, so Fanfest is in 2 weeks and there's still a lot to finish. The wig is done, the Bane dress is done, the shoes are done, most of the accessories are done. What I'm missing now is her staff. So the first thing you should know is like I ended up ordering all the 3D printed pieces from Dangerous Ladies to make this staff because I didn't want to build it from scratch. So the thing about this is since I want to bring it to Vegas and I'm flying there, I need to make the piece so that it can be unscrewable, so that it can be disassembled into many pieces and stored into a suitcase. I'm not sure 100% if this is gonna work out very well, but I'm gonna give it a shot. I've already started gluing some pieces together in an attempt to like kind of see which pieces are gonna be individual pieces. So I would have my bottom piece. Then I have this piece that would go right like this. No. Haha, yes, this one goes like this. Then on top here you would have this one. Yes. Then it's removable, and then so on and so forth. So then the ball would be its own piece because I want to be able to put in some lights. So I need to have access to those little holes because my light is not gonna have a button. I'm not much of an engineer. I'm not very good with LEDs. I don't know how to build a circuit. People in the Montreal area, if you are willing to work with me to build LED circuits for specific props, I will pay you for your skills and your time. Hit me up. So instead I have like these little pieces that I'm gonna put in. I'll show you all the details later. But this needs to be separate so I can essentially put those pieces in and then be able to like put it down. And I have this one that goes like this, which will also be screwed in. But like that's the thing, can I even do that? I'll figure out the details later. Anyways, so fingers crossed I can get all of this done. If not, I won't bring it with me to Fanfest, unfortunately. Like that is the reality of it, but I think I can make this happen. The first thing I need to do is I bought these dowels. This is the actual size that was recommended by Dangerous Ladies, but it's a bit of a tight fit in a lot of places. So I've also been using like a size down and filling up the sides with some resin to make sure that it's still a tight fit. So for longer pieces like this one, it's better because I can't quite reach inside to shave off some extra space and whatnot. In hindsight, I don't think I'd recommend using a smaller dowel. The problem with having a dowel smaller than recommended, even if just a little smaller, is that it will compromise the stability and strength of the build. Filling in the full cavity of the build creates less weak points for it to break from. You'll see me comment later on how I think the piece is a little too fragile in certain sections. So after working on another project from Dangerous Ladies with a friend, what I'd recommend is lightly sanding the dowels that don't fit and using a hammer to help like knock them into place. It actually worked out pretty well on my friend's piece. I'm gonna start by finishing building up this piece, sanding and inserting all the dowels where they need to go. So we're gonna start that now. I'm starting by lightly measuring out the length of dowel I'll need for each section of my staff. I then cut out all my pieces with a handsaw. I'm struggling here, but after cutting several pieces, I got much better and much faster at it. As mentioned earlier, I struggled to get the dowel pieces to fit in certain sections, so I did sand off some of the width to make them fit properly. Especially for the section with the orb, they need to be able to fit in and out of the dowel easily. I also used a file to try and sand off the nubs inside the 3D print. The nubs weren't from problems with the print itself, but entirely from slight misalignment when gluing everything together. Okay, so I've got all my pieces almost ready. I added a smaller dowel in the area for it. So now this piece is glued in place because this needs to stay flat here. And then I'm gonna glue this one in place. And afterwards, the way you would put it on is you would slide this in here like this. So I can slide it out and put in my lights. And then you would slide in this piece. This one is a bit trickier, but it should. Actually, I think I'm gonna go the other way around, if not mistaken. Okay, so now it should slide in. It's a bit hard to slide in. Okay, you are working fine. Why are you doing this now that I'm filming? Yeah, there you go. So you slide this in. It's a bit hard because of this piece here, but it does slide in. So it's just out. Okay, make sure that this is facing properly. There you go. And there you go. So lock and load, and somehow now this is too short and it was fine earlier. I'm a little bit upset now. Anyways, I need to readjust a little bit apparently, but the idea is then there's going to be a screw coming out of here which will allow me to screw this bit, and here it's going to be an insert piece, so I'll be able to screw in this side. But I think it'll work, so I'm gonna work on each of these pieces individually now, like cleaning them up. In this case, adding pieces where there's pieces needed, until they're essentially just ready to be XTC 3D. Once I had all my sections glued and the dowels cut to length, I started sanding down all the nubs from the print. I'm using a Dremel to do the heavy lifting, but be warned, what the Dremel does is more of a mix of sanding and melting off the piece. It was a bit of a weird process, but I made it work. Once the heavy lifting was done, I switched to hand sanding to smooth out as much of the surface as humanly possible. I'm also using a range of files to try and get into the little nooks and crannies of the print. There's a whole lot of weird organic shapes to the staff. For this section, we'll be revisiting a technique I've shown in my Moogle Wings video. If you haven't seen it, I suggest going to check it out. I'll link it in the corner. But if you're not familiar with that video, let me give you a quick recap here. So what I like to do to fill the gaps of my 3D prints is use UV curing resin. I'll apply the resin into the gaps and try to smooth out the resin around the gap using a small piece of foam. This is to avoid the resin from curing with bumps and lumps, or as little of them as possible. Now make sure to put on your UV goggles and then set your timer to 2 minutes to let it fully cure. The light absolutely needs to come very clearly into contact with the resin to properly cure, so make sure to work in small sections. It's then back to the sanding board to smooth out all the joints. Okay, so the next piece that I want to finish is this one. So what I want to do is I want to use those little balls and make those holes here bigger so I can essentially just plop them in there. And do the same on this side. Make the hole just a wee bit bigger, pop that in there. So if I have two at the same time, I have two directional lights like that, and it kind of looks a little bit more even. So I'm just gonna take my Dremel and start trying to make this section a little bit bigger to fit my hole. Same with this. It won't be perfect. You'll see them sticking out a little bit on the outside, but that's the price I'm willing to pay to get some light in this ball. I'm back with this piece right here. So as you can see, I've added some resin all around the wings. Now they're very, very sturdy, which is good because you don't want these pieces to be fragile. And another thing that's important here is that I had to extend this hole to make it bigger, which this hole stays very subtle still, so I'm very happy. But when I extended this hole here, it became so big that you could see it. So what I did is I used some foam clay. You might have, if you're a cosplayer, you might have heard of it. So I don't know how well it's gonna work on this. I have installed it here. I'm gonna let it dry. Then I'm gonna attempt to remove this piece, which I'm hoping won't, my fear is that it'll break it. So I'll see if maybe I can go ahead and remove this piece and then let it dry and have it be fully functional. Hello everyone, welcome to the chaos. So yeah, I've been working on my staff without filming much because I had to figure out how I was gonna get this working. So I bought these different size dowels. So one is a half, which is supposed to be the one that goes in. I have a smaller one for the smaller parts of the staff. And I have a smaller one than a half. I don't remember the size exactly, but just a little bit smaller to kind of manage to get it into the long areas. It's a little loose inside, but at least it still helps the whole staff stay together. Now the tricky part here is that I want to bring this to Vegas and I don't want to have to ship it. So ideally I don't want it to be in one full piece. I need to be able to disassemble it to put it in a suitcase. And I think I have managed to do that. So if you can see here, essentially I'm able to unscrew it and have two separate pieces. This is in 3 sections. So I have a section here and I have a section here that are done. I had to test it out and see what works, but I still have one section at the top that needs to be set to be able to be screwed properly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and do that and film that section so I can kind of show you what I did. And hopefully by tomorrow I'll be able to start sanding down the edges so that they all kind of match somewhat nicely to one another. But yeah, that's where we're at. I'm giving myself 3 days to finish this and then I have to focus on other parts of my life. So fingers crossed it will be done by Wednesday. Today's Monday. Fanfest is next week. By the time you see this, Fanfest will be over. Okay, let's get working. The technique I'm using here was taken from Lightning Cosplay's video on how to create separating props using a special set of screws and screw inserts. I highly recommend going to see that video for more in-depth instructions and better instructions, but here are my comments and highlights. Since I'm using square dowels instead of round dowels like they had in their video, the alignment in this case is super important. I'm making sure to properly mark the center of each one of my dowels. The biggest problem I ran into when doing this is the size of the dowels was just too small to even accommodate the smaller set of inserts that I could find. The wood kept splitting every time I tried to insert the piece. I attempted to repair these with my UV curing resin. It worked okay, but I wouldn't really recommend doing that. Instead, I'd probably look to see if the print can be adjusted to accommodate a bigger dowel. If you're buying the 3D model itself and can make some adjustments to it before printing it, that's what I would do before printing it. Again, this is only if you want to make it so that it can be unscrewed into several smaller sections. Maybe there's another way to do it all together while still using the 3D print. I'm not sure. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments section if you have any ideas of your own. Now, before setting the dowel into the 3D print, I'm making sure the screws and the screw inserts are positioned so that the dowels align, and then I'll be installing the dowel permanently into the 3D print. Now, after a lot of sweat and a lot of tears, I managed to get something to work. So, it's finally starting to come together. Now it's just a question of evening out the seams as much as possible in between each of the cracks. I don't really care if it's not perfect, but we want to minimize seeing them. I'm personally particularly happy with the orb. It's really looking good. It's not seamless, but I mean, from a distance, it looks pretty good. So yeah, I'm gonna work on that, and then they'll all be ready to get each of them a coating of XTC 3D before I move on to painting. I finally have all my pieces ready. Now they're gonna need finishing before I can prime them, and then paint them. So what I like to do, it's a little on the expensive side, but I actually like to use XTC 3D. So XTC 3D is made specifically to brush onto 3D prints and smooth them out. I think it works really, really well, and it's fairly easy to use, though there are some precautions to take. The way XTC 3D works is you get a 2-part to 1-part combination, and then you have, honestly, maybe 15 minutes to use it before it starts hardening. So it's a very small window. In other words, you want to work in small quantities and slowly work your way through the 3D print. You'll need a few of these little they're little plastic cups, and they have the measuring on them. I find those are the best ones to use. The problem is you can only use them one time. So one of them comes with the kit, but it's not enough because once it's been used, you can't really reuse it. You'll also need some wooden sticks like this, and I recommend either getting brushes or these little foam brushes to apply onto the print. Also important, and I highly recommend that, is to have some gloves to protect your hands. Now, I think something that's very important to really understand is you can only mix it in small quantities. And I'm gonna read verbatim what's on the package. It does caution this. It says, very important, mixed XTC 3D resin is exothermic, meaning it generates heat. A large concentrated mass of mixed materials in a container can generate enough heat to melt the plastic cup, burn your skin, or ignite combustible materials. So I didn't read that properly once when I did it, and I mixed too big of a quantity, and that's exactly what happened. It got so hot, it started to melt my cup, so I had to take it outside and just wait for it to kind of stop generating heat and start hardening. It's dangerous, but if you take it outside far from anything combustible, it's fine. It'll eventually stop making heat and it'll settle down. So I have everything. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up all my pieces so that I can use them like that, like they can be accessible by a wooden rod. So that's what I'm gonna do, and then we're gonna get started on getting all the pieces XTC 3D'd. When mixing your XTC 3D, always start by measuring out part A. Part A is thick and more viscous than part B, so I suggest going very gently and tapping the cup down as you go to help level it out. Part B, on the other hand, comes out much more liquid, so be careful not to overpour. Remember, this is 2 parts to 1. Make sure to properly math out what you need before you start pouring. Also, make sure to stir thoroughly before you start applying the resin to your print. If it's not stirred properly, it won't cure properly. As I mentioned before, it's better to work in sections when applying XTC 3D. Luckily for me, since my print is divided into several pieces, the sections end up being each piece. I devised a few different ways to hold each section up in such a way that I have full access to every surface at once to avoid having to wait for one side to dry before being able to apply the resin to the other side. I've also put together a little stand of sorts where every piece can be set down to dry for several hours. Just a reminder here that I am no expert on this, and I highly recommend reading the full instructions that come with the product and maybe watching some how-to videos that are put out by the company. Okay, let's have some coffee. Ta-da! Alright, so I have all my pieces here. They've all been resin coated, and there's definitely still a lot of work to do. Well, at least some work to do. Essentially, what happens is it does have a tendency to leak and create like these little bubbles here, so I have to go in and sand all that. It won't be perfect. Like ideally what you want to do is you want to give it like maybe a second or even a third coat, but I'm not going to do that because I don't have time. So we're going with a one coat is gonna have to work kind of situation. It's gonna be a blend of dremeling, especially like the little bits that really like accumulated intensely, and just sewing with a sanding block. In this case, because it's in different pieces, some resin can have settled at the top. That's not really good because it can get in the way of getting a nice tight lock between the two pieces. So I definitely want to remove any excess resin there too. I'm gonna start with that, and once that's done, I will officially be ready to start painting. At the very least, we're gonna get all the sanding done and the priming done today. For the painting, I ended up taking my full little setup outside. I ended up using Rust-Oleum's Painter's Touch in color Dark Walnut with a satin finish to paint all my pieces. This was recommended to me by my friend who paints miniatures as a hobby and career, and it ended up working really well. Off screen, I attempted to add some shadows using watered down black paint and some highlights using a silvery gray. The difference is really minimal, but I did try to do something there. Now for the smaller details, I used my airbrush and made sure to keep some translucent properties so the light could still shine through. Very quickly, let's go over the sections on the gems. I applied all my gems to the staff using the UV curing resin again. When assembling those pieces, I had inserted a string into each piece so that I could tie them around the staff along with gluing them in place. I just thought this would be a little bit more sturdy. The gems did end up breaking off from the staff at some point, so it's good that the strings were there, but I ultimately decided to remove the strings and just glue back each piece using super glue. They remained fragile, unfortunately, but I think they look better this way. So I think we're ready for a reveal. Let's see how the whole thing turned out. So what to say about all this? Did it travel well, right? Because the whole point of the build was so that it could be disassembled and then put into a suitcase and then travel to the con. It did travel. Did it travel well? Yes and no. There's been some hiccups, but some pieces of it did not actually make it into one piece, but it didn't actually have anything to do with like the disassemblage and everything to do with just how big and fragile a 3D print can be. This is why foam is often recommended for traveling, because it's much more forgiving, because it's much more flexible. If there was some type of material that could be used that would allow a bit more flexibility to the piece, I think I would opt with that. The giant head of it just could use that, to say the least. But like I said, that has nothing to do so much with the build and the way it was glued and stuff, and everything to do with the fact that 3D printing is just inherently fragile. Not to mention, like, I did struggle with the dowels and the thickness of them due to how small the cavity inside the print is. So, all in all, do I recommend buying the print? Yeah, sure. Actually, it's really good. Like, it's a good print. The details are there and it looks really nice and the quality of the print is good. Would I recommend traveling with it? By plane? No, it's really garbage to travel with, especially when airlines are being poops and like forced me to check in something that was supposed to be a carry-on. Overall, still very happy. I like the color. I like the lighting. I'm so happy I managed to make the lighting work. The little balls actually hold a lot of life. Personally, I reuse them until they're completely dead, just to be as little as possible wasteful, you know, because I do get that not being a rechargeable battery makes it a bit more wasteful. Honestly, I'm pretty happy that I managed to get it done on time for Fanfest. It set me back a lot on a lot of like commissions that I was working on. Was it worth it? Yes. It was really awesome to have the staff there with me at Fanfest. Spoiler alert, I do have a Fanfest vlog in the works. It's taking a long time to get there. I don't even know if anybody will still be interested in watching it by the time it comes out, but please stay tuned. That'd be nice. I did wear it also at Otakuthon after doing some mild repairs. And yeah, it was a hit. It looked really good. And I figured now that the whole costume is done, I could kind of show you a few cute photos of the whole thing together. So all the photos were taken by Camera Ninja, Paul Hillier, and you can find him on Instagram and all his beautiful work. But I think he did a fantastic job and the photos turned out really, really nice. So I'm only gonna show a few here and the rest you can find either on my Instagram, though not in their full glory. The uncropped pictures will only be on my Ko-fi. And they're not hidden behind a paywall or anything, so you can 100% go check them out there. And yeah, I think that wraps up today's video. I hope it was entertaining enough. I worked really hard on this one. Like, I really wanted to do something fun because it's the first time I do an in-depth video of a prop I've made. Goodbye, guys, and see you next time.